Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Ben shows us maps of soil moisture and drought indicators this time of the year to keep in mind before the 2024 season. Lynn was at the ICM Conference last week. Here's some takeaways from his time there. One of our dealers in the Indiana area provided research on seed treatment comparison. See why our starting line plus with Saltro Trunemco seed treatment provided a 4.8 bushel advantage over the competition. Joe and Turk discuss how interest rates are staying steady, but how does that compare to the past and future?
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Turk. Ben's going to lead the discussion today.
Yep, so wanted to get a little bit of an update on where we were at from a soil moisture percentage here across our sales region. The first picture that Alex will throw up for us is a 4-inch soil moisture where we are. We've caught in probably about 1.5 inches of rain over the past month, maybe a little bit more than that, here in southeast Iowa. So our 4-inch soil moisture here shows that we are not at a deficit or at an excessive level, but there are areas once you get up around Des Moines that are definitely drier. There are areas in our southern footprint that's pocketed and is drier as well. The second picture that we're going to throw up is the 2-foot soil moisture, and they're calling that the shallow groundwater drought indicator. And there are also some areas that obviously mimic and match, but the 4-inch moisture has a little bit more moisture in there compared to the shallow groundwater. So we got a little bit of a ways to go. There's a system that's supposed to be moving across Saturday afternoon that will probably help alleviate a little bit more of this, but we're going to need some help in that soil moisture profile to get us set up for next year for sure.
And we don't have a lot of frozen ground. It's going to soak in whatever we get.
Right. The on a couple episodes ago of Cup of Joe, when we did our post-harvest update for the local people, we started at we didn't start the year at a deficit. So we had some nice rains in March and April that caught us up to where we had some tile lines running. And I think that's definitely what got us to our yield points at where we were at this year. So definitely need to be keeping an eye on where the drought monitor's at, and hopefully we see some reprieve. I'm sure we will.
Yeah, there's some good research going on at Iowa State up at ICM Conference. I missed last week, so this is my update from that Sartorius has begun some research with some grad students on monitoring our 2-4. I think they were going to go down even further than that, groundwater, water table moisture. And the big reason that he said that we did so well last year was because of that 2-foot, 2 to 4 foot. We're able to sustain long periods of drought, light conditions, because we actually started the year in a positive situation with our below ground moisture. Now when that equilibrium changed as we got to the later portions of the seasons in certain areas, then yeah, obviously they're having some issues. When you get into Nebraska, southwest Iowa, they just didn't start out in that comfortable position that we're at. So I think it's really cool, the research that's coming out, where they're taking a look at how we can produce such good crops without rainfall during the growing season. Well, it all goes back to how do we start the year from a below ground moisture standpoint.
Well, always remember what Elwin Taylor said over the years: the rivers can be dry and you can still raise a bumper corn and soybean crop, and that's because the excess runs into the rivers, into the ponds. And he always had a good outlook. Look at the gas tank, like you said, Lynn. If the gas tank's full, starting the spring season, you got a good shot at a good yield. And right now our gas tank's not on empty, but it's less than half full, I'd say.
Yeah, great example. When I think I sent you guys that the video middle to end of June, we were having some crop stress from heat related issues, and our tile line that goes into the pond right below the house, it was a trickle, but it was still running. So we still had a little bit of groundwater that was trying to make its way out. So the crop underneath the surface was hanging on pretty decent. We just had to get rooted down to that point. And once we did, I think locally that's why we saw such good crop response for the growing season.
Not excessive heat from above.
Yep.
So the plant could rest in the cooler evenings. But just remember what Ben said last week at the meeting. In other words, keep your potash levels up, up in the upper area. And if the drought is 6 weeks, you just reduce the drought to 3 weeks. You cut the drought in half by keeping your potash levels high. So I'd see a lot of potash going on this fall. And I was talking to my brother Henry in the fertilizer side, said farmers are definitely replenishing the potash, which is a good sign.
And really what we're talking about here is by keeping your soil levels up, especially right after you plant, if you have available nutrients, the plant's going to grow faster, and we're going to get roots down into that water table. And that was the key that they talked about, is soil health. As soil health continues to improve, as farmers are doing better soil management practices and cover crops and those kinds of things, we're getting better soil health, we're getting deeper root penetration quicker, which again reduces that stress. And so I think that's what they're looking for, is how are our management practices affecting our ability to handle stress, especially moisture stress, as we get those waters down. And as the yield levels that they had this year really equated to how deep the root system was in that particular field. And when you see those big variations, that's what they're finding is a compaction layer or something that needs to be dealt with in order to get that root system down.
Couldn't agree more. One of the other things I wanted to show here and throw up on the screen is it's a forecast for the 4-inch soil test, or 4-inch temperature for clear out to Christmas Day. And if you take a look at that picture, here in Southeast Iowa, we're skirting right up to 50 degree 4-inch soil temps for Christmas. So obviously between now and then, no, not
almost
quite.
50 degrees.
Not quite.
Not quite.
But what I'm thinking about when I see that, we're going to go through a cold dip here this at the beginning of next week, but it's going to warm back up, and we're going to have sustained warm temperatures for a little while here. So I'm starting to pay attention to how much rainwater we're getting. Starting to keep a log on how much rain are we getting. When was the anhydrous put on? Was NSERV used? And be starting to think about what the nitrogen program for next year looks like, because those bugs do have a tendency. NSERV will keep them asleep or suppressed for a certain amount of time, but there is a little bit of activity that's starting to work on some of that NSERV. So just be keeping that in the back of your mind on when you started, where we're at now, and what happens between now and spring is going to be key for making some of those nitrogen decisions.
Correct. We get the bugs woke up hypothetically, and there's no crop out there to use that nitrogen. It has to go somewhere, and unfortunately we know where that tends to go. So it's very, very, very critical as we look at this. I don't want to call it a climate change, but as we deal with maybe a little bit more warmer temperatures as we get into December, January, just keeping an eye on that, so that way you're not shorting yourself as we come in the spring. Because I think 3 or 4 years now we've done in season around VT nitrate test, and we're typically 30-40 pounds shy when we look in those certain situations on fall applied, no NSERV. Not an endorsement, it's just something anecdotally that we've seen, but I don't want to say we can attribute it to it, but there is probably some form of loss that comes from that fall applied when we deal with these adverse weather in the sense of warmer, potentially more wet conditions.
Right.
Now, John Felt, our weather forecaster that we sponsor, he's saying the air masses are going to flip-flop here in January, and we're going to go out of the warm and into much colder, of course, back to normal winter, I guess. Yeah, so we'll see if that happens. That might help us a little bit hold that nitrogen if it gets colder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my whole point behind it is that we're not necessarily losing nitrogen right now, but you're chipping away.
Correct.
And you're not taking big bites out of the nitrogen. It wasn't a mistake to get the anhydrous put on or use the NSERV, but these warmer conditions just start chipping away a little piece by little piece, and you just got to keep these things in the back of your head when you're getting ready to make next year's plan.
And you can do the nitrate test in the spring and see what you got, and then you can adjust accordingly. I mean, it's pretty easy to do.
So Joe and I were talking before we started filming this, that talk about your warm temperatures at Christmas, that my daughter actually was playing in the sandbox on Christmas Day, and when she was about 6 years old. She's 46 now, and so about 40 years ago, we had the same conditions that we're experiencing right now. Is that called climate change?
Climate cycles.
Cycles, yeah.
Did that show up on your Facebook memories?
It probably will. I don't think we had Facebook back then, though.
If you put it in,
but I could probably come up with that picture.
Yeah, that is for sure. The other thing that I had here was Illinois Soybean Advisor had a nice article about comparing the direct costs of soybean production in the United States versus Brazil. We'll put a link to that article. I just thought it was interesting that their fertilizer prices are a lot more expensive because they have to import a lot. We take for granted, when fertilizer prices are expensive here, we have our neighbors to the north in Canada that have quite a few potassium mines, and then in Florida we have all of our phosphate mines. If I have that correct, I'm pretty sure.
Yep,
I don't have
you
those
do.
flip-flops. So we have some internal the ability to produce our own dry fertilizers, and South America doesn't necessarily have that. The one thing that they did have against us is their seed costs were a little bit less expensive, but their total direct costs across the board are more expensive when it comes to pesticide applications because they have a longer season, they have more heat, so they spend more money on pesticides, whether that be insecticides and herbicides. Because of the season that they have and the soil types that they have, they spend more money on pesticide, they spend more money on fertilizer, but they do catch just a little bit of a break on seed costs. So I thought that was interesting. You can read that article if that's something that tickles your fancy.
That's our competition, so you need to know what they're up to.
That's right. What do you got, Lynn?
Yeah, so last night was provided some information from the Pence Group, one of our dealers out in Indiana, on some research that they had done.
It's near Lafayette.
Yep, near Lafayette, Indiana. And one particular comparison that I found really, really interesting here that they provided in their to their growers, that was a seed treatment comparison. And I know we talk a lot about seed treatment, but this is another one where a third party is providing this data to us that just keeps building this portfolio that we're really excited about. And then their testing, Starting Line Plus was a 4.8 bushel advantage over the check. And this was all done on Mershman McKinley's, so untreated. They have their own in-house treatment option, Starting Line and Starting Line Plus. And from a return on investment standpoint, the Starting Line Plus was their number one winner. So I think that's very important as we look at cost and as we look at profit margin, that the ROI on Starting Line Plus, just another, I guess, tip of the flag to Starting Line Plus, that another information source is coming out. The data is there, that the money and the ROI opportunity with Starting Line Plus is getting to the point where I'd almost say it's a no-brainer.
Well, Starting Line and Starting Line Plus, the difference is Starting Line Plus has the Trunemco and the Saltro added, so you're going after nematodes and you're going after sudden death, and those are two biggies out there right now. I mean, just about everybody is fighting those two big problems. So we're seeing our sales for Starting Line Plus continue to grow because farmers are seeing those numbers on their fields too.
And I would say that would not be a high pressure situation at all either. So one of the plots we were looking at in central Illinois, this plot as well, we were both in those fields at pod fill, and we didn't see heavy sudden death pressure or any sudden death pressure, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
I don't know what the soybean cyst nematode counts are, but in moderate pressure, in light to moderate pressure where you're not seeing visual differences, that 4.5 to 5 bushel number comes up a lot.
Correct. And that, as we talk about that 4.5 and 5 bushel with soybeans, I mean, that's something you will see on your yield monitor. A lot of times when we get into some of these higher yielding environments, we're looking for 1 to 2 bushels, which is really hard. If you got a 40-foot draper head, to see 1 bushel pass to pass, it's really hard to pick that information. But what we're talking about is statistically significant, great return on your investment type numbers coming out of this product. So if you haven't got your order in yet and are looking for, another point of emphasis here, another party gave us some information that's proven, what we're seeing now, probably nearly 2.5 years replicated from our providers, from our test, our strip tiles. The data's there, And as Joe said before, we'll put this up against anyone, and it looks to be a pretty fruitful endeavor for us.
Turk, what do you have for us today?
The Fed's decided to hold interest rates steady this year, and they talked about what their plan is for next year, which is to start a reduction in interest rates and possibly 3 interest rate reductions in the first half of next year, which has got everybody at the stock market and everybody excited. So the good news for farmers is your operating lines should be coming down from the high of what we can expect, and they kind of talked about selling out the interest rates for operating loans maybe in the 5 to 6% range rather than 8 to 8.5. So good news for farmers. It's going to take a little while to get us there, but it sounds like we're on the right track. And I heard a speaker talk this morning that said that the reason that the interest rates or the 2% goal that they're after isn't already here is because they're talking about the cost of housing is still high. In other words, rents are high and everything else is high, which is what they're using on what's being reported. But the reality is that what is being reported, or what is the reality is actually much lower than that. And they said they would be at their 2% if they use that number rather than what they want to get for housing. So it's again, all this stuff is kind of smoke and mirrors. I mean, we're kind of talking about who's trying to control what with what price, and reality sometimes is different, which basically what I'm trying to say is we're in a good spot, and I think we're going to continue to be in a good spot, and lower interest rates and everything is going to help us with commodities and the ability to export as well. The other thing that happened this week was the South American president was announced Argentina, and he the first thing that he did was drop the peso by 50%, and so that's going to definitely help. And he wants, his goal is to get rid of all export taxes, and so that means that there's going to be additional competition coming out of there. But the trading that we're going to be able to do with them is probably a good thing for all commodities in the end. And it sounds like they're really leaning toward growing a lot more wheat down there. So,
well, one of the things I heard on my way to work this morning was that the freight rates, the container rates and everything have dropped so much that Costco was saying that their TV prices are down pretty significant from a year ago, just because of the transfer of costs from the overseas containers. And of course, we're going into 2024, an election year. You know, we're gonna whitewash everything we possibly can to make it look like the current administration's doing their job, which I hope they are, and we have some good times. So usually that's 2024 looks like it's off to a good start.
That could also have something to do with the interest rate reductions.
Could be. So it'd be
politics.
They're talking a 1/4 point, 3 1/4 point drops is what over the next 3 quarters, I guess you might say. So we'll see.
That'd be similar rates to when I first started my first banking job. So,
which is more normal rates, not. I mean, everybody talks about the 20% rates that we had in the mid '80s or early '80s, but
yeah, 1980, I got my house loan. I thought I got a deal, and it was 13 or 14%. I think.
Yep, that was
the deal.
That was kind of the norm back then. I ended up I bought a farm about that time, and it was 7%, which again everybody thought, well, that was a pretty good rate for a long-term rate, and so.
But these young folks don't know what
the
interest rates are.
We don't.
But it was just part of the how you figured your cost. I mean, it was built in, and then you budgeted for it because it was what reality was. When you go from 7% to 20%, that's not budgeted very well.
Well, just to give you another example, I remember my mom and dad in 1961 built a house. The house cost $17,500. I remember that as a little kid, and the interest rate was 5%, and the house payment was $90, and they didn't know how they were going to make it. The $90 payment in 1961. So I mean, you know, it's all relative. I mean, so a 5 or 6% rate compared to 1961 is still with inflation, and you know, what is not that bad, you know.
This farm I bought, it was 1974, and I was the first farmer in Cedar County, Iowa to pay $1,000 an acre for land, and everybody said I was nuts because interest rates were 7%. You know, price of corn was running $2.50, $3 at the max, and it just penciled, and that was about it.
So Turk, you still got that land?
I still got it.
I'll give you $2,000 for it.
Double my money, huh, Joe?
Don't have to worry about paying taxes on it. Minimal capital gain.
What a guy! What a guy!
Yeah, so that's the problem that I'm dealing with right now is, you know, how to transfer that effectively.
Yep. Yeah, to try to keep it in the family. Yep. And that's a big problem for farmers as they get larger and larger, and the numbers, you know, they keep adding more zeros to all this land, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are ways to do it, but it involves lawyers and trusts and things like that. So,
well, Uncle Sam, he's got plenty. I think he'll work with you, hopefully. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, when it comes to the corny joke, and of course you know why we tell the corny jokes, because some seed company back in the day put out a seed catalog and get them to turn the pages, they put a corny joke on every page to keep the interest of the reader. Well, you know, I was begging for some help, and I finally got some help. Okay, I had 3 people send me jokes this week. So
last week must have been bad.
Yeah, it must have been really bad.
This is a statement.
So I don't know it's good, maybe it's bad. I don't know. I mean, but anyhow. The first one comes from Dave, and this is, if you know your chemistry, you know, it's a chemistry joke, okay? Why shouldn't you throw sodium chloride at people? Why shouldn't you throw sodium chloride at people? That's a salt. That's a salt.
Salt.
Yeah. Sodium chloride is table salt.
Can't
right?
do that.
All right. Kevin sent me this one here, and it made it through the censors, but just barely, you know. We try to keep this thing PG as much as we can. Why couldn't the toilet paper cross the road? Why couldn't the toilet paper cross the road? It got stuck in a crack. Okay? Okay. May not want to tell your kids that one. Anyhow, it was a good one. Now, we're getting close to Christmas, as you know, and Steve sent me this one, one of my high school classmates, okay? How much did Santa pay for his sleigh? How much did Santa pay for his sleigh? Nothing. It was on the house. You know, he lands on the house, goes down the chimney.
Yeah, got it.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm glad that Steve sent you a PG joke.
Yeah, it's usually, well, I won't go into that. Anyhow, we sincerely appreciate your business. We know that right now you're making your seed decisions. Give us a shot. Check us out. We got some great products, great seed treatments, and some great people, and some super quality. We hope that your family is safe, and we'll see you next week.